Welcome to Austin Tech Connect, the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. Presented to you by Netspend. Homegrown in Austin, Netspend has been a leading provider of consumer and business payment solutions for almost 25 years. From prepaid cards to mobile bank accounts to money movement services, Netspend connects people, brands, and payment products to deliver innovative financial solutions.
Hello there, and welcome to Austin Tech Connect. This is the podcast about the future of Austin's technology community, and it is the official podcast of the Austin Technology Council. My name is Thom Singer, and I work with the Austin Technology Council, and we're looking at ways to help bring Austin together. You know, we have grown so much over the past 10 or 15 years. It's crazy how many people have come in, and one of the things we need to do is work to bring everybody together in some way. In the Austin Technology Council, we're striving to be that thread that runs through the tapestry of tech. We're trying to make sure that we're promoting all of the other nonprofits that are doing great things in tech and that we're uplifting them and working together to create amazing events so that everyone in our tech ecosystem can thrive. On this podcast, every single week, we bring a local leader together to share their story of success and to hear their advice on what is the future of technology in Austin. And today, I am excited to have Martin Martinez from the Founder Institute, Texas, joining us right here on Austin Tech Connect. Hey, Martin, welcome to the show.
Thom, thank you for having me, man. It's good to see you.
Glad to have you. For those of you who don't know Martin, and if you're around the tech business for the last 7 or 8 years, you should know who he is. He runs an accelerator called the Founder Institute, and he's been doing that for 7 years. They focus on people who want to start technology companies in Dallas, Houston, and Austin. They've worked now with over 125 companies, and what they do is they take somebody with that idea in their head, that dream, that spark, that hope, and they help them turn it into a full-fledged, functioning business. He also likes to attend all the great tech events around town, and he's been known to host some of the really good tech parties that happen. So, Martin, what's your background? How did you even get to the tech sector here in Austin?
Well, then, Thom, first, thank you for having me on this. I have been looking forward to kind of jam with you on this show. But, you know, to answer the question of where I came from, I was the 7th-generation Texan to begin with. So the twang comes in and out from time to time for those of you listening.
That might be a record. I've got some 2nd and 3rd generation people on the show before, but 7 generations, that you might be the longest longevity of family lineage I've ever interviewed.
At least as far as we can track, you know, once the Spaniards hit, then it gets a little murky post that. I recently discovered I have some indigenous blood. Might be Cherokee, or excuse me, Comanche, but I got to do a lot more work to validate that. But either way, I grew up in San Antonio, where most of my family still resides. All, you know, family group from the Valley through South Central Texas, and a lot of people moved to San Antonio in more recent times. Moved to Austin 20 years ago, now for school. Now that I think about it, and I fell in love with this town. You know, I did spend some time in Dallas as well, kind of did the tour up and down 35, but Austin has always been a home, and I always kind of had the entrepreneurial bug. It also kind of ran in the family. I had a great grandfather who was a very well-known kind of restaurateur, mostly focused on like desserts, like snow cones. I think that's a story for another day. But in more recent times, I also have a family that's really deep in events. So my mother worked and still does. You know, she produces like galas and fundraisers. Used to be for the old Spanish missions, think like the Alamo and all the surrounding Spanish-made, churches back during that era. My cousin, who's now pretty well known down in San Antonio too. He does a lot of fundraisers as well for our high school, but also used to run a festival for like 120,000 people every spring. So events have always kind of been in the blood, but entrepreneurship has kind of been tied to that too. So with my dad, I had a small lawn and pool care business in high school, helped pay for the bills for the family and myself, because I always felt like I needed to earn something. In college, while I was studying architecture, I spun up a social media marketing agency. You know, this was like 2008. It was not that. I did not call it that. Nobody called anything that. Most people just called it crazy. And I think that was the first turn of where my life was going to go. But it worked. It worked. I was working in bars and restaurants throughout college, like most kids do. But I just happened to be a part of that first wave of the Facebook generation. And I capitalized on that in a really fun way, such that I didn't have to be behind the bar anymore. I was at the managers' meetings every week and just kind of thinking of clever things to say on Facebook and Twitter to get people into the bar or the restaurant for brunch or happy hour. So that worked for a while. It got me stumbling into everything else I do, if I think about it that way. I was an early Facebook employee because of that when they first moved to town. A few years later, spent some time at Google, and then jumped back into entrepreneurship. I started now about 11 years ago. I started what was then a event production CRM. As I mentioned, I've done a lot of events, but I wanted to build a tool to help me better organize these events, source, and also maybe source sponsors, book talent, venues, et cetera, all the things you need. This is still a problem that a lot of people are trying to figure out, but we were trying to do that, me and my co-founder back then. But we didn't have anything that we know of Austin today in terms of the support network. There were certainly investors, there were certainly tech companies, but there really wasn't, again, the infrastructure that we see now. Certainly things like Founder Institute, but things like Techstars and the proliferation of co-working facilities and all this other stuff. A lot of it was still reserved to the university level, or you kind of had to know somebody. So that said, still raised a little bit of money. We still had, some runway to work with. I even got us on MTV again. Man, that might dovetail into another story for another day. But that was a great go-to-marketing stunt that we pulled. We did a lot of those, but we still did everything wrong. We did everything wrong, just from validating the idea to feature creeping to just how we handled our conflict resolution. You name it, we did it. We did it spectacularly wrong.
Story of my life, but I get it.
Story of our lives. But I mean, in retrospect, it was a lot of learning. It was certainly a lot of wisdom now. But I wish I had an organization like Founder Institute. The Founder Institute at large has been around since 2019, but back then they're only in a handful of cities, just around the country. They were trying to get in Austin at that point, but again, I was not aware that this thing existed. Fast forward today, when we started Founder Institute, my whole focus was to ensure that people didn't make the same mistakes I did, that they'd avoid the same kind of just dumb, blind hope and stubbornness that comes with being an entrepreneur in this space. I think being an entrepreneur for the first time for many individuals, they face that. They fight their ego. They fight, taking feedback. They don't admit that they're wrong very often. And this is just everything you're not supposed to do, right? So what we do at Founder Institute, we fast forward to today, we do that, but we also bring a network, a community of people that have done the same things I did. Maybe they've done them a little bit better. Maybe they've done them worse, but we've all learned from it and we're in a position where we can give back. It's a reason why I've been working on this for so long, and we've been able to expand and reach more Texans and just people moving to Texas that want to start businesses in this state. So it's been really, really rewarding to kind of watch that but also kind of grow with this community too. Really just find, a good fit into this ecosystem and really give founders that come into this program a chance to really get good grounding and you leverage it as a springboard as well, so that they can move a lot faster than anything I could have ever asked for a decade ago working on that startup.
So I want to back up because, you mentioned that they were trying to get into the Austin market before you launched it here and all this. So what's the history of Founder Institute?
Good question. So Founder Institute was actually kind of a spin-off idea of a very infamous site like 15 years ago out of Palo Alto called thefunded.com. It's literally still there. You can Google it right now, and it's a time capsule back to 2008. It's just tiny graphics, and just it's got all the design features that would take you back to the mid-aughts. But it was started by a man named Adeo Resi. You may know that name now for running a program called BC Lab, which is another sister organization to Founder Institute, where they teach first-time emerging managers how to start venture capital funds. But back then, Adeo was really well known as Elon Musk's best friend. I mean, they're still best friends now, but they were best friends then too.
Hey, I mean, if you're going to have a best friend, having a billionaire best friend doesn't suck.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Elon just only had maybe like one or two bill back then, but I think he has a few more these days, and a few more companies to boot. But so they were they were college roommates. If you read not the new bio that just came out by Isaacson, but the old Ashley Vance, I'm sure Adeo's in the Isaacson one too. But they have a whole chapter about how they rented out an apartment dorm and tricked them out into parties, $5 a head, every weekend to pay rent, and then entrepreneurs in own right. Funny thing, Adeo and I both studied architecture too. It was kind of a bonding moment for us when we first met. But Adeo started the Funded. And it was kind of like an Angie's List written up from founders who were dealing with all of the pangs, trials, and tribulations of dealing with VCs in Silicon Valley, because there was no reference point. Nobody knew who was good for their money, who was going to crush your company and liquidate it, and just all this other stuff. So it was kind of just running blind going up Sand Hill Road. So it made a lot of people frustrated, made a lot of people mad. But what they discovered as they started to get all these reviews, that a lot of these founders that were griping about how they weren't getting money from VCs had no business being in the room, for one, because they hadn't done a lot of the fundamental work to actually warrant a VC taking a meeting. And this is just basic validation. It's structuring the company appropriately. It's just understanding where your product will fit in a market, and as a starting point, and using that as an inflection point to grow. All of these just basic things that you should be doing on day one that, like myself, years later, just nobody told you. You didn't know you had to do that. And there was nothing to really guide you in a structured way to do it too. So they started the very first program, that late 2008 in a classroom at Stanford, saw it really moved out of that very first cohort as well. Company you might be familiar with, Udemy, came from it. Mm-hmm. And it was just kind of up and to the right. Over the years, they started expanding in other major markets with this structured 3.5, now 4-month program. Started going into New York, Chicago, Southern California, and it wouldn't be until almost 10 years later where I finally had the opportunity to help them get into Texas. But they had tried about 5 years earlier, experimenting with a virtual program. Fast forward, 7 years, that it works now. But back then, the tools weren't in place. Certainly the internet speeds weren't in place. But I don't know if the attention spans were there too for somebody to want to just sit on a computer.
I don't know that they're still there now, but right.
Another reason why we moved our programs in Austin, at least back to in person, because they're not. The 2020 to 2022 were some interesting times.
So let's talk about the programs that you run in Austin. You just started one last week. And so what number is that in Austin, and what's been sort of the trajectory of the programs you've run here?
Yeah. So yes, we just finished our summer recruitment for our fall programming. We typically run in spring and the fall in Austin. It just kind of fits with our own wider calendar, South by Southwest, vacation season. But over the course of about 15 weeks, founders, we'll start with about 30 on day one. This is going to be, I believe, in Texas, the 19th cohort. It is the 19th cohort now, and we really kind of put them through this gauntlet of validation for the first few weeks. About the first 6 weeks is going to just all entail just proving that this person's doing the work and is actually listening to people who are dealing with whatever problem it is they're trying to solve. So half the room, and we'll typically start with about 30 people on day one, just individuals, aspiring entrepreneurs. They might have a co-founder with them, they might not, but typically about 30. Half the room has just the idea in their head. They've barely spoken about it. They probably have a day job, or maybe they're just leaving a job, and they want to just see if this is something that they can do. Entrepreneurial curious, I guess, is a good way to describe them. The other half is already kind of working on something. They've decided on an idea. They might have that co-founder with them, and they've been spending time either already kind of building this wireframing or doing some of the basic validation piece. But either way, all of them are going to have to go and find dozens and dozens of people that kind of fit that demographic that deals with this problem daily, hopefully daily, that this product or service is going to be able to help solve. And ideally, they'll be paying money for it. So, and if they can't do that, by either just their people aren't there, or the problem doesn't exist, they'll typically end up leaving the program, dropping out, as we refer to it. The surprising thing is that most people quit, especially at this point in the journey, and that's a good thing. Actually, it's by design that our program is built so that you can walk away early. But for those that don't, if you make it past our 6-week kind of milestone review session, we start with the incorporation process. If you have yet to incorporate, we have some great partners on the legal side that help them at a very, very competitive rate to incorporate quickly, understand all of the other stuff that you got to do to get blessings from the U.S. government to actually operate a business. And you're making it official. You're marrying this idea. It is becoming real. And by the end of the program, if you're still there, and I mentioned about 30 individuals will be present on day one for our orientation, only 6 to 8 companies will, on average, statistically speaking, will be with us at graduation demo day 4 months later. And again, I say companies now because sometimes, there's co-founders that come in. Sometimes you meet your co-founder in the program. And so we've had as many as like 15 individuals graduate, but still only 6 to 8 companies. And if you are on that demo day stage, 4 months later, I put you in a room with 200 people, many of them investors. And this is kind of your debut into the entire wider Austin community, and then eventually the wider Texas community. You'll get 3 minutes on a stage, and you're pitching now. Maybe something that you wouldn't think was possible 4 months earlier, but we make that real for you too. And it's a really rewarding and it's a visceral experience for those founders. And it's really kind of a testament of just all the work, the hundreds of hours they put in over the course of those 4 months just to get to that point. But it just starts there. Now they got to go build the dang thing. They got to grow it. They got to go get those customers, and they got to keep motivating themselves now that effectively those training wheels are off. And we do provide a ton of support afterwards. I mentioned I do a lot of events, so I'm always hosting pitch events. I'm connected with a lot of organizers around the state and the country, and it's a really great opportunity for them to just go out into the races very quickly and make their presence known. And that's really what I build up for. That's always the most rewarding part of this thing, is just watching them shine on stage.
And one of the things you're known for is that, you're a super collaborator with the other organizations in Austin and beyond, that are there to help support businesses. You've been a good friend to the Austin Technology Council since I've been there, and I've seen you work with other groups and stuff like that. Why, so many people operate in their own silo. Why are you so tentacles out into the community?
I think it's two-pronged, just at the very minimum. First thing is that this is the beginning of the journey for them. If we were the end, we'd bring in a bell in the New York Stock Exchange for them. And why would I need to talk to anybody? It's the end of the road, right? It's up and to the right. But for them, they still got to figure out where's right and what's up. And there's a ton of people. Many of the mentors in our community are individuals like yourself. They run organizations. They have later stage venture backed accelerators, or they run venture funds or angel groups, or they're individual angels in their own right. So this is just the beginning of those relationships for many of them. So it's not only beneficial, it's incredibly important and necessary to want to have that mindset of collaboration, because those mentors, they're going to see them much later down the road. Many of the mentors that they meet in our program that are investors, they're not ready to get a check from them anytime soon, but they're building a relationship to the point where they know them on a first name basis. They have their phone number. They can give them a call and go get a coffee, just friends, as colleagues, peers, support group. But when that founder is ready to seriously go and try to raise some money, that investor is going to take them seriously. They will be a serious person versus just somebody kind of cornering you at a networking event and won't let you leave until they go through an hour demo on their phone of their app. And also they want $1 million and they want you to go marry them and call, FaceTime Elon and just pat him on the back and all these things. And that's just not how you're supposed to do these things. That's a big turnoff. And a lot of first-time entrepreneurs, many of them that don't go through Founder Institute, make that mistake every single day at every single networking event.
So why do you think so many people who start your program don't complete your program? I mean, that's, you're talking like 2/3 don't make it through. Why is it so high?
I mean, it's by design. And unfortunately, every aspiring entrepreneur we meet on day one, the majority of them don't realize how hard this really is. They just don't. It's their first time jumping into it. They've seen the movies. They've read the memoirs from the successful people who can tell the story the way they want it told, but they don't really read between the lines. Me, and I've heard it over and over again in my life, not as much anymore, but I still hear it from time to time. But every entrepreneur hears this, and typically from the people that they love, that love them the most, is that, they hear that they're crazy. You're crazy. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do the safe bet. Don't do that. Why would you do it? Like, no one's doing that. This is stupid. Don't do it. Don't fail. You're going to fail. And that's when you hear that enough from the people that you care about the most, that care about you the most. It's one of the most discouraging, isolating, and lonely things you can do to start a company. And so people, once they see the reality of that, they'll walk away. They go do the safe bet. That there is a percentage of people that do that. There's some people, like that proverbial individual I told you about, who corners you at the happy hour and won't let you leave. There's that person too. They're stubborn. They don't take feedback. Especially at this part of the journey, you don't really know a lot about a lot. And if you're not open to feedback, any investor will tell you this, they're not going to write you a check. They're not going to let you spend their money because you still don't know what you're doing. And if you come in with, full ego blazing, knowing everything about everything, cutting people off mid-sentence because you already know what they're going to say and you have an answer for it, but you don't know what they're going to say. You're being presumptuous, your ego's leading, and you really just want a pat on the back, validation that you're being a good kid, and literally Elon's phone number on to FaceTime, and you're not going to be successful either. So, I meet this person maybe once a week. You meet this person probably at least once a week. And I'm sure people listening on this phone or listening on this show are like, oh God, I'm going to a networking event right now. I'm going to meet two of them. They don't last long. They just don't last long. The personality type's up there. But that's just at the individual level. Life happens too. And this early in the journey, you might lose that job. There might be a health scare. It's hard to quantify the percentages outside of just the ego. But every person's different. But at the end of the day, I think the great majority of individuals, they leave because it's just not a good idea. And it's not a big enough idea. I don't want to say it's not a good idea. It's just not a big enough idea. They start talking to people finally. They start validating it. And if they're not open enough to pivot or drop the idea altogether, and maybe, as I mentioned, you might meet your co-founder of the program, maybe fall in love with somebody else's idea and you love working with them too, they'll walk away. But in many cases, if it's not like a personality issue or we're asking them to leave and they're doing this on their own accord, it's for the best. And I've heard thank you countless times because we've done them a favor. It's better that they spend, a few $100s over and like a month to test this thing out versus put their daughter's tuition on the line and maybe, put a second mortgage on the house for an idea that was never going to work, or for heaven forbid, might be very late to market, or they put the wrong expenses on the wrong thing. I can't tell you how many times, myself included, they immediately just go, I need to hire a designer for logos. I got to go hire, a CTO developer to build a website, but they have no idea how to do either of those things. And $80,000 later, they're sitting with, a bunk website, a bunk app that just ain't doing anything. And that person or the individuals took the money and ran. That I've heard that a lot too.
So you're just starting this 19th cohort, 30 people. And after this cohort's over, what's the future of Founders Institute? Where do you go 1 year, 2 year, 10 years from now? What's down the pike for Martin and Founders Institute?
Well, we have, it's been a big undertaking to come back to in person. We were Austin was the very first program globally in 3 years to return to strictly in-person programming. I mean, I think we all know where we've been since the turn of the new decade, so we won't need to belabor that. But we did really well online. We're a global organization. We're in about 200 cities, 100 countries globally. So we had a lot of the infrastructure in place as early as 2018 to kind of support virtual programs, just a very vast, Zoom infrastructure and just back-end communication structure and all the custom learning management system processes we have. It's just really made it work. And our community really rallied around it too. But especially in Texas, we just as humans in general, we're innately, collective individuals. We want to be with individuals. We want to connect in person. Zoom was not going to cut it. So I spent basically since 2021 on a path to get us back to just butts in seats, getting people in the room. There's just an energy that you cannot match online, unfortunately. And I don't know if you ever will. And so that was a big undertaking. We were able to do it across the state. All of our programs are now in person. As we look to, the years ahead, maybe I made a promise to myself 7 years ago that I'd see it through for 10. And I had just turned 30, so I'm dating myself now, Thom. So as I look through the second half of my 30s, it's certainly something I want to see all the way to the finish line. At least from that perspective, that promise I made to the kid, just turned 30. Now, ideally, I would love to be in more cities. San Antonio, my hometown, has always been something that we've been working to. I'm excited about everything they've been up to there. There's a lot more going on. It's a solid hour 15 from Austin, and we've been in talks. There's only so much I can say there. I would love to get all the way to the far end of Texas. I've had some really amazing conversations with individuals out in El Paso. Granted, it's still 9.5 hours from Austin. You're halfway to California at that point. But that would be amazing to see if we could have that total coverage across there, and even all the way down to the Rio Grande Valley, the unknown Texas Triangle, at least this far north. It's something that's really special going on down there. But I'd love to see Founder Institute being able to bring this in-person program, or even a virtual level or a hybrid level to the rest of the state. Nice. That's always been important because that's one thing that we saw on day one. That was the whole reason why this Founder Institute Texas vision became so, was that very first cohort we put on, I had people from all around the state travel for it. They got in their cars, they drove 5, 6, 7 hours from all parts of the state to take this program once a week for 4 months straight. And many of them just got right back in their car and drove straight back home. And they did it every single week. It blew my mind. And we didn't get into a second city until our third cohort. Every single cohort that happened, every single cohort. It was telling of just how needed this program was. I mean, I already knew that in 2013. It would be another 4 years before we can make it happen. But that was something that I knew, I guess, then and there. Was why I wanted to spend the good foreseeable future building this out and making it real and building this community to what we see it is today.
So you've been around Austin for a long time. You've certainly been in this, deep in this since 2018, doing what you're doing. What do you think is the state of tech in Austin, and what do you think is the future?
Oh man, I hope I don't make anybody mad that's listening to this. I've been always optimistic for what Austin has been able to do and what it will continue to do. The pandemic, I think, brought a lot of great talent to town that's now starting to really get acclimated. It certainly brought a lot of money as well. A lot of amazing, very successful, well-known venture funds now have roots here, and are now swinging a lot of money in the right ways and encouraging more people. So there's certainly this inertia that now that, pandemic here in Texas, you can feel it. it feels almost like we're back at 2019 levels in terms of just the activity. Unfortunately, we did lose a lot of organizations as well because of the pandemic. Some weren't as adept at being able to transition from in-person to online. We lost a few spaces and organizations otherwise. I'm hopeful that more of them will come back, though. One thing that I've seen, especially in my travels around the state, is that I worry that this town might be getting complacent in what we have, and I would challenge us to stay hungry, and stay hungry, stay foolish, as we all know, and because they're coming for us. Houston's doing an incredible job at building from the top the infrastructure. They have some amazing facilities. They have tons of capital that is now really understanding that, hey, maybe we should transition out of some of these traditional industries and start really focusing on the future. And, I said San Antonio as well. San Antonio's got a vision that has nothing really to do with Austin. They're looking south to the border and back and trying to connect the Rio Grande Valley in a way that San Antonio's that apex. And there's some other forces out of our control. There's only so much we can do about that state capital. But again, that's the conversation for another podcast. At the end of the day, I would love to see this community stay as hungry as it was when I was trying to build something. That's the caution that I would give to anybody that's just moving into this town that's trying to embed themselves in an organization. Not necessarily if you're trying to start a company, but if you are trying to be a part of this community and level it up, bring it up to another echelon, that those founders, those future investors, and anybody else that's startup curious still feels the energy, because we may be losing it. I don't want to be any Debbie Downer or pessimist, but we do have a lack of options in terms of where the in-person experiences can reside. I think that is changing. There's a lot of space. We're in Texas after all, but we can't lose focus on that.
Well, and I agree about the stay hungry and don't be complacent. I say that to everybody that I can talk to. In my role with Austin Technology Council, I'm really involved with a group called TECNA. It's the Technology Councils of North America. And so there's 100 tech councils around North America. 66 belong to this organization that I'm active in. And it's not just Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. It's every region in North America is hungry and is learning. And they've spent 20 years in some cases benchmarking what Austin did. And the climate has changed. They can't do what we did to hockey stick up to the right. But the world is changing. We can't keep doing what we did 20 years ago either, 10 years ago. So, and I also don't think we have to compete with all these regions, because I think that the things that are coming down now means that we can collaborate across state lines and across country lines too. So I think we have to be looking at the fact that, the world of business is going to change, and it can change from Austin out if we're smart.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. On the micro level, when I was, spent a couple of years in the first few of Founder Institute, kind of just trying to talk about it the way I did in Austin that first year when no one knew about it. I'm doing it in Houston. I was similar pushback, Dallas, similar pushback. All the cities just had it like, what is this? Why are you doing this? Don't do it, that kind of thing. But then we started to have the programs and people realized, oh, this is important. I would always say, let's leave the needless competition to our sports teams. That's quite literally why we have them. That's why we have them, for needless competition and bragging rights. But economically speaking, what benefits one city should benefit the state as a whole. And that's always been my philosophy. And I think that's what's been kind of a resonating point for a lot of individuals when I say those words. I don't say it as often as I used to, because I think there is a lot more cross-state collaboration. But the same should go for other states that are copying this, to your point, right? I mean, you're seeing this in the South with places like Birmingham. You're seeing it all the way up to the Carolinas and back. So you're absolutely right. There are other cities, and Austin would still be categorized as like a tier 2 city for this kind of stuff, especially from venture capital. There's really only like 2-3 tier 1 cities in North America. And you're thinking Silicon Valley, obviously, New York, Boston, if you're going international, maybe Toronto, and everything else is going to be in a tier 2. It's nothing to take away from Austin or any other city I didn't just mention, but That's just where the concentration of that wealth is. Maybe we can get there in 20 years. I think we can, just looking at the growth numbers and just what we're doing here. But there are certainly other cities that might be categorized as tier 3 right now that are looking at Austin saying, I want to leapfrog you. Mm-hmm. And we got to be mindful of that. We got to stay hungry as well.
So, Martin, I tell everybody who will listen, my personal slogan is community, collaboration, and conversations can solve all our problems. I believe that's true. I think we need more community, collaboration, and conversations in everything that we do. Which one of those words resonates the most with you and why?
It's community. Absolutely. Again, this is a lonely journey. It's a lonely journey. I won't belabor that anymore, but there's been many times where, as a founder in my own right, I've neglected that. Asking for help, knowing when you need it, and just asking for it. Had a great mentor one time tell me, you'll never know what you can get if you don't ask for it. Like that Wayne Gretzky one about those shots you never take. And it stuck with me, and then it kind of opened me up and opened up my humility a little bit more and just made me a little bit more honest about when I need that support. And I say that to all of our founders that come in on day one too. So community is kind of like a bedrock of what we do, why I do what I do, and why I continue to do what I do for this community, because without them, we wouldn't have great founders coming into the program. We wouldn't have the support for said founders that want to graduate through the program, as well as everything that's going to happen once they leave the program.
So I tell everybody, Austin Technology Council, we're trying to empower Austin through community engagement. And that's why we need to have that community, as you said, as being the word you chose. I think that community piece is really important. And to have community, people have to show up and be engaged. So, yep. Martin, if someone was coming to visit you from out of town, maybe one of your friends from California, maybe one of your relatives from San Antonio, and they'd never been to Austin before, where's the one place, whether it was a restaurant or an attraction, what's the one place you would take them?
Oh, man. Over the years, it's changed. When I first got here, it'd be Mount Bunnell, right? It's beautiful views, right? And that'd be more like my friends. Watch a sunset, right? Now, I'd go take them. And then there was a time where I'd take them down South Congress, where there was a lot more live music and it had a little bit more of that Austin flair. It's changed significantly over the last few years, though I'd still take them down there, though I'd take them to the places that have been hiding there that you don't really know about, like a specific little jazz lounge sitting up top of the Continental Club. That's always a good spot. That's some great old Austin music right there, Austin vibes. I'd probably still take them there. It's called the Gallery. It's right above the tattoo parlor by the Continental Club.
Hey, I learn something new every day. I've been here 32 years. I didn't know that, so I'll go check it out. Well, hey.
Cash only, and when you walk in, just bring a 5 or a 10, and then you're good to go.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being here on Austin Tech Connect. Any last words?
No, I think you got it all out of me, my friend. But if I did have to say any last words, I would just say for anybody that's here building something, you aren't alone. You're not crazy. There is community for you, and it's okay to ask for it and look for it. And Founder Institute is a place that can be that for you. We should have a conversation. And it's not even necessarily me. We have hundreds of people that are familiar with it these days in town. They'll tell you the same.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for being here, and thanks for being a good friend of the Austin Technology Council. And hey, thanks to everyone who tuned in and listened to this podcast episode. You know what? Is your company a member of the Austin Technology Council? We would welcome your involvement because we want to have your voice in our tech council as we look to how do we help guide the future of Austin. So make sure that your company is signed up for ATC today.
Thanks for listening to the Austin Tech Connect podcast. Make sure your company is a member of the Austin Technology Council and add your voice to the future of our tech ecosystem in Central Texas.